Welcome back, APUSH students. Today is chapter 27 of the American Pageant, titled Empire and Expansion. If you don't know the American Pageant, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. Our Country, Its Possible Future, and a longer title, is a book by a reverend encouraging imperialism. It gave reasons stemming from a hypothetical crisis situation for America to spread their values to other lands, reasons also rooted in American superiority, altogether just encouraging American expansion because America can institute better values than other places already have. Alfred T. Mahan, author of a book highlighting the importance of sea power. His works helped to encourage America to join the naval race against other powers to gain control over the oceans. Other places like Spain, France, and Britain already have very powerful navies. Big sister policy encouraging connection between US and Latin America. It encouraged relationships between markets throughout the Americas, which upheld American superiority. A lot of these relationships with Latin America definitely favored America because they were more powerful. Great Rapprochement, agreement of cooperation between the United States and Britain. It reversed the long status quo of the two sides disliking each other, which dates all the way back to the American Revolution, and reflecting it through their policies. It set a stage for unity among Englishmen in the imperialist age. Britain, as just like the United States, is already a very industrialized and economic booming area, so tying the US and Britain together across the Atlantic Ocean is very powerful. Hawaii, island off the coast of the US in the Pacific Ocean. It was gradually overtaken by white Americans, despite the opinion of the majority of natives stating they did not want to merge with the United States. Hawaii became an early example of American imperialism against small and vulnerable populations, specifically to serve their economic interests, which was to cultivate sugar. Hawaii obviously eventually became a state in the late 1950s, I believe 1959. McKinley Tariff, larger tariff against foreign imports. It negatively affected Hawaiian sugar markets in the Americas, which inspired efforts to annex Hawaii, which would eliminate foreign barriers economically. In order to import goods into the country, you have to charge tariffs, which would input an economic burden on sugar coming from Hawaii to America. But if it was just part of America as a state, they would avoid the tariff, and that was a large motivation for annexing Hawaii. Queen Liliuokalani, I believe, the last queen of Hawaii. She was against merging with the United States as she blocked annexation efforts. Her presence encouraged Grover Cleveland to try and block annexation efforts as well, but in the end, Hawaii and her rule eventually fell to the United States. Cuba, island in Central America. Their people were woefully mistreated by their government, and in combination with the United States tariffs affecting sugar crops, it encouraged the population to revolt, and they would eventually establish a socialist sort of dictatorship down there with the famous Fidel Castro. Yellow journalism, we touched on this I believe in the last chapter. Journalism based on emotion rather than facts. The atrocities being committed against Cubans by the government became easy material for American journalists trying to inspire sympathy for the Cuban revolt and therefore encourage a similar path as seen in Hawaii. USS Maine, US naval ship destroyed off the coast of Cuba. Although it blew up because of internal problems, it inspired the inaccurate but popular opinion that it was attacked by Spain, which was just exacerbated by yellow journalism, which led to a greater lust for war and imperialism among the population, which, like I just said, can be attributed to yellow journalism. So you can see how yellow journalism really impacted current events in the United States and abroad. Teller Amendment essentially declaring war on Spain and Cuba. Although it claimed that after American intervention in giving Cubans their freedom, it received rightful skepticism that the United States would exert control over Cuba after the conclusion of the war. So even though America just said that they would quell their revolt and just give Cuba back, based on America's imperialist sort of culture and determination, people weren't so sure that would happen. Rough Riders, volunteer regiment fighting in Cuba. It consisted of various groups including Western cowboys and criminals, which worked to symbolize the broader theme of confusion and disarray that encompassed the Cuban invasion. As we will see, the Cuban invasion was sort of just something that did not work. Anti-Imperialist League, organized group against American imperialist expansion. It encompassed a diverse range of people, including labor leaders and business tycoons, showing how the issue of imperialism was a new issue that did not follow typical party alignment or social divisions. Obviously, something like a labor leader and a business tycoon would not usually be on the same side of anything, but here it was obviously something different. White Man's Burden, poem written by a British pro-expansionist. It described an idea that it is the duty of the rich and civilized white man to help uplift other people of the world out of their underprivileged state, which encouraged imperialism while also invoking underlying racist tones. So although it's kind of good on its face that people should try and help each other, it's really brewed in the idea that white people are better than everyone else, and that it is their job to uplift other minorities out of their so-called like dangerous cultures and try and assimilate them into white culture, which is a very dangerous idea with just simple, thinking. Foraker Act giving Puerto Rico small rights in government. It spells out the early story of Puerto Rico, one of which progress and gains were made under American rule, but with little hope for actual independence or autonomy with the United States. Even today, Puerto Rico is still a territory of the U.S. Insular cases, Supreme Court cases not extending constitutional rights to conquered territories. The ruling meant that America could rightfully treat people of annexed territories as subjects, which opened the door for mistreatment following American imperialism, which was not the intended goal. So for any of you AP Gov students, you might be taking it next year. Subjects are way different from citizens. Subjects are basically in total control of the government. They don't have rights for themselves. And according to the Supreme Court, people of territories not yet deemed states could be treated as subjects, which was just full imperialism, and that was realized. Dr. Walter Reed, doctors who ran experiments on sick soldiers. His experiments helped to discover the cause of yellow fever, which fit into the greater theme of medical progress against the growing diseases spread due to imperialism. He helped to eradicate yellow fever. Diseases coming with imperialism dates back all the way to the theme of the Columbian Exchange back in the 17th century. When you combine new areas, new peoples, you get disease, and thankfully now at this period, the medical field was advancing and getting out ahead of it. Platt Amendment agreement in Cuban Constitution appealing to the United States. Despite Americans leaving Cuba in 1902, various promises in the agreement gave the government small levels of control in various areas that were meant to keep Cuba out of the hands of other countries looking to invade Cuba, like the United States did. So Cuba gave some provisions in their constitution. The United States still had some control, just so another country like, say, Spain would come back and take Cuba again, or would not do that. Emilio Aguinaldo, I believe, man who led a revolt in the Philippines. He created a war between the Filipino people and the United States troops, which eventually developed into a gross race war that completely flipped the script when it came to original American purposes for annexing the Philippines in the first place. The Philippines definitely exposed America's imperialist undertones when they were trying to shroud it with some moral objective, because this basically turned into a race conflict, which was not good. Open door note, US urged to other powers to respect Chinese rights. Although it had good intentions, it was actually a message from the perspective of serving American interests rather than from the philanthropic perspective of upholding Chinese rights. The reason why they wanted to uphold Chinese rights is because they wanted to promote good trade relationships with the Chinese people, because America wanted to profit economically from China. Boxer Rebellion, group of Chinese people against foreign Europeans. They killed many foreigners and Chinese people converting to Christianity, showing a sense of nativism and resistance from the Chinese against European imperialist nations trying to serve their own interests through China. So although America and other Western nations were trying to uplift them economically by trying to establish good trade relationships, they obviously had some undertones of imperialism, and the Chinese people recognized that, and the Boxer Rebellion was basically saying, we don't want anybody siding with the West. Election of 1900, election in which McKinley won and Roosevelt became vice president. Although the Republicans won, it was not a mandate for imperialism, but rather a mandate for prosperity and protections from foreign powers within the domestic regions of the United States, not outside. So although broadly Republicans supported imperialism, just because they won the votes were scattered and the messaging was not for imperialism, which basically stated that even though McKinley won, he could not just come in and become a full imperialist president. Theodore Roosevelt, vice president and eventual president, he will become a major character when he becomes president. He was a cowboy who became famous for his military efforts in Cuba, and when he took office, it connected cowboy culture to Washington, connecting that western side to the east. It also sprung him up and out of New York, where he was making headway against powerful and corrupt political machines. Speak softly and carry a big stick, a motto adopted by Theodore Roosevelt. His motto encouraged action above words, which encouraged him to take the powers of the presidency much above the precedent set by the Constitution and previous presidencies. This is where the power of the president starts to greatly expand into the 20th century. This will become full blown out when you talk about guys like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal. But for now, Theodore Roosevelt starts that process. High Poncefote Treaty, I don't want to even say that I pronounced that right. Treaty allowing for the United States to build and control the Panama Canal. It allowed for the United States to finally legally complete the project, while also having full authority over how it is used. Major diplomatic victory. I'm not too understanding of the geography here, but the Panama Canal is a major economic route, and because the United States had control of it, they would now have control of a lot of the trading and economic activity down in Central America. Panama Canal built crossing Central America. It helped to give America more control over affairs in Central and South America, economically and politically, which led to various effects. Roosevelt Corollary Amendment to the Monroe Doctrine. It's not actually like a constitutional amendment, but it's just Theodore Roosevelt's little twist on the Monroe Doctrine, which is obviously very old. It essentially gave full control to the United States for addressing the well-being of Latin American states, stripping any ability for foreign powers to take advantage of struggling Central and South American nations. So kind of like that Monroe Doctrine idea, the United States were basically claiming that they own the Western Hemisphere and that it is their duty to take care of these lesser countries, not inviting any imperialism from the East, but basically imperialism from the United States. 1908 Gentleman's Agreement where Japan stopped immigrants from going to the United States. Although it was secretive and discriminatory, it helped to ease race relations and tensions between Japan and the US by stopping the mixing of the two populations through immigration. Basically, it was like a racist solution to the already intense race relations. So it stopped the, not really violence, but the tensions at the time, but it wasn't a good long-term solution. Great White Fleet of American ships traveling around the world. It was a show of great American power, but its warm reception from many foreign nations was a sign of improving relations with America becoming a world power. So although America was sort of flexing their muscles because it was well received, we can assume that it wasn't a total power grab for the United States, but is actually a show of trust with other nations. Root Takahira agreement to be respectful and uphold Chinese rights between Japan and America. It helped to create peace and a cordial relationship between two powers, which had gained so much power in such a short time period. Japan and China rose very quickly in the 19th and then into the 20th century, so making sure they sort of agreed with each other would prevent any violence and conflict in that area. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye.